Men are lonelier than ever, and it's not an accident.
You've all heard it. Sam and Frodo, Naruto and Sasuke. Frog and Toad, look what they have done to my boys. Have you had enough yet? Brothers standing shoulder to shoulder somehow turned into something cringe and cheap. These stories resonate with us because they remind us of something simple that we have all forgotten.
So we push back, and these are most popular videos from the channel this year, which all talk about fellowship.
Put together, they're gonna give you a roadmap for how you can have more of it in your life. So let's begin. Those who cannot conceive of friendship as a substantive love, but only as a disguise of eros, betray the fact that they have never had a friend. Fellas, is friendship... Ha! Gay! With June now behind us, some call it Pride, there was another fresh round of national conversation about LGBT representation in popular media, and I came across this nightmare. Frog and Toad, remember them? These books by Arnold Lobel, who was gay by the way, were among my favorites as a kid. My memories with these books aren't visceral, but they're more like fingerprints. I still feel the warmth of these stories. And it has a lot to do with the sincerity and simplicity of that friendship on those pages. But like so many other popular stories and friendships, people like to twist their meaning, and I'll tell you why they do this. Friends are fellow travelers. We recognize ourselves in them, and when friendships are healthy, we reveal ourselves and aren't punished for it. That's a very simple fact of most male and female relationships. There will always be some higher degree of scrutiny over the pairing, and in many cases, the friend zone or the failure of a romance to come about is taken as rejection or punishment. Men, like women, need space for relationships free of this factor, where none of this is taken into account. Friendship is about affection, but you hear it all the time. Sam and Frodo from Tolkien's Lord of the Rings is a perfect example. They must be gay. These two men couldn't possibly travel Middle-earth together, sacrificing life and limb, comfort and safety for anything other than sexual attraction. And my God, the eye contact when they speak to one another and cry in their shared suffering. The word toxic gets quite abused, but it's actually so toxic to suggest this. And it comes from the very people who complain the loudest about straight men's emotionally withholding nature. Men should cry more. Why can't they share their feelings? But if they do, gay.
Wait, hold on. Wait a second. This is gay. This is really gay. Yeah, this is even gayer than all the men getting in a big pile and having sex with each other. Okay, sorry, my bad. Everyone back in the pile.
Back in the pile, everyone! We're going back to the pile.
C.S. Lewis, a warm friend of J.R.R. Tolkien for a time, wrote about this in explicit terms in his book, The Four Loves: Affection, Friendship, Eros, and Charity, which lays out a vision of masculine friendship in chapter 2. In it, he starts off, it has actually become necessary in our time to rebut the theory that every firm, serious friendship is really homosexual. It applies perfectly to Frog and Toad and also to Sam and Frodo when Lewis quips, "It cannot be proved, and it cannot be refuted." This chapter is some of C.S. Lewis's most fiery and clearly agitated writing. The very lack of evidence is thus treated as evidence. The absence of smoke proves the fire is only carefully hidden. If there was an invisible cat in the chair, it would look empty, but the chair does look empty, therefore there's an invisible cat in it. There are so many great male friendships in literature and TV. Sherlock and Watson, Corey and Sean from Boy Meets World, Arnold and Gerald, Jon Snow and Sam Tarley, Jay and Silent Bob, Turk and JD from Scrubs.
There's nothing gay about it in our eyes.
And there's different flavors of friendship. The bromance is the TV sitcom default. It's guys backslapping, being vulgar, venting about their wives, and just having fun. Sometimes these on-screen relationships toy with the gay question as a matter of comedy, JD and Turk being a good example of that.
You're the only man who's ever been inside of me.
Whoa, whoa. Playing grab ass is part of the shtick, and that's a thing that guys do with select friends. Then there's the service buddy, the guy who you work with and share a mission. Castiel and Dean from Supernatural, Band of Brothers, Sam and Frodo. Sometimes we choose one another's company, but sometimes we don't. In the Fellowship of the Ring movie, Samwise Gamgee is sort of deployed by Gandalf to accompany Frodo because he heard about the ring through the window. But it's a relationship over overflowing with a sense of duty, shared love for something bigger than themselves, and a mutual respect. Lovers are normally face to face, friends side by side. Men thrive in labor together. The best friendships I ever formed were in shared suffering on Boy Scout trips, in the rain, in the cold, in the wind, trying to set up a tent together in the dark, and men used to work together more regularly side by side before the digital era. I'm very lucky to work from home and have a keyboard warrior job, but it's isolating. I imagine many of you out there experience the same thing. I hated my cubicle job in my 20s, but I loved the presence of my cubicle mate, Dave, and his Star Wars bobbleheads and daily jokes about Grand Admiral Thrawn. There was a camaraderie and a kind of bromance that it was kind of surface level, but like the warmth of a fire, you can feel it most sharply when it's no longer in your life. Men are, in fact, dealing with a crisis of loneliness in the modern world. The culture changed, but so did the economy, which has elevated the skills of loner types and diminished the contributions of men eager to work side by side toward building something or destroying things. The pleasure in cooperation, in talking shop, in the mutual respect and understanding of men who daily see one another tested is biologically valuable. One of the key features of worthwhile friendships is that the circle expands to include others. C.S. Lewis wrote that the opening line of a friendship is, "What? You too? I thought I was the only one." Things begin in a shared love for something and grow from there. For C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien, they were opponents at Oxford on a matter regarding the English language curriculum, but they found out that they were both obsessed over Icelandic myth and language, and so they formed a club around it called the Coalbiters. No one is going to find a friend based purely on selfish motivation like ending their loneliness. It has to begin with a passion and an interest in other people. Men do want to work together and feel like they're part of something. The Stoic Seneca touched on this when he described seeking out friends just so that you won't die alone. Anyone thinking of his own interests and seeking out friendship with this in view is making a great mistake. Those kinds of friends are fair weather and clingy. The fellowship that forms in Tolkien's Rivendell is not an amalgamation. It is part of the masculine instinct to take up arms with the guy next to you. We long for courage, and so often we're just waiting for the guy next to us to get the ball rolling. Someone has to say I first. Truly meaningful friendships, they are not closed. They invite others into it. Two men getting together like Lewis and Tolkien did to share their writing becomes a campfire that other men want to join, and that's the group that became the Inklings, which helped birth The Hobbit and the Screwtape Letters and Narnia. Friendships have to be about something, and that can be literature or fantasy sports or soccer, video games, or war reenactments. You will not find the warrior, the poet, the philosopher, or the Christian by staring in his eyes as if he were your mistress. Better fight beside him, read with him, argue with him, pray with him. Masculinity requires doing things. It's not just setting things right or bringing order to chaos. It involves saying yes when you might want to say no to your kids, to your wife, to your community, to the guy at work who wants to hang out on Friday when you're tired. When you get locked into despair and saying no and you retreat into yourself, there's nothing there. The world becomes worse off and you need to be a part of it. Men have to be willing to get hurt and to be challenged. I think a lot about strained friendships like that of Boromir and Aragorn, or Bucky and Captain America, even 007 and 006 before the events of GoldenEye. They're people in tension with one another. They fight, but they're passionate. They care about things. John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, America's most explosive frenemy relationship, was so warm and so affectionate at one time, and so wounded because these men wanted to build a country, but they couldn't agree on the details. They loved one another because in that friend, in that rival, was someone else who cared. That's what I want. I want people in my life who give a damn and want to talk about it. Men are not often very good at this. It does take time, but that starts with making your values known. It gives somebody else the opportunity to reciprocate. You have to open the door so someone can walk through it. And guys, that relationship might end up looking a lot like Frog and Toad or Sam and Frodo. There will be hugs, backslaps, eye contact, tears, anger, and quiet coexistence. You can sit around and play video games, do nothing, or go out on an adventure. You share one another's company. Now, why does the culture try to corrupt and deride friendship? One of C.S. Lewis's most bold claims in The Four Loves about this is that friendships are a threat to power and collectivist tyranny. When you form a clique, it discriminates and sets up walls around it about who is a good fit and who isn't. It's selective and values-based, and those values can be bad or they can be good. And what he feared most was sort of a quasi-communist world in which all men are companions, but none are friends, which is to say they are forced into one another's company. Nobody chooses it. Friendship is a miniature rebellion against larger groups and power structures. And I think deep, affectionate, and values-driven male friendships are in fact threatening to some people. So be a bug in the system. Build friendships. And that starts with putting your values out there and purpose for people to see. Let's get it done. Thanks for watching Geeky Stoics. I'm Steven. You can find out more about what we do over at geekystoics.com.
The hobbits know it, the Stoics knew it, but somewhere along the way, we lost it. I'm talking about fellowship, the kind of deep, loyal friendships that we see in Lord of the Rings and Band of Brothers, not just your water cooler buddies at work, but real friendship. Today we're diving into Tolkien and the philosophy of fellowship. You know, the idea of friendship, of fellowship, it's been something of a controversy here on the channel, and by far our recent and most popular video is on the corruption of friendship. If you haven't watched it, make sure you check it out here. But today I wanted to be specific about the things that we've lost as a society. So I've been reading this book. It's called Hobbit Virtues by Dr. Christopher Snyder. It explores a series of virtues that we find in The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings that we should aspire to. So the virtue we're focusing on today is indeed fellowship. So yeah, our most popular video ever is about friendship, specifically the importance of preserving and recognizing deep platonic friendship. And the harm that is caused when people project sexual attraction onto clearly platonic fictional friendship. The classic example where we've seen this is Sam and Frodo.
We don't have to put a label on it, do we, Sam?
But today we're going to go deeper into the actual philosophy behind friendship and why it matters in the first place. Because right now, I would posit to you that the very institution of friendship in society is under attack. And when I say friendship, I'm talking about the basic human connection, the things we saw in the stories we watched and read growing up. We're talking about Ron and Harry and Hermione, Anakin and Obi-Wan, Sam and Frodo. If I were to be honest, like growing up, I didn't have a lot of close friends. I moved around a lot. I never lived anywhere for more than a few years at a time. And this made it difficult to strike up like deep, healthy, meaningful friendships. The kind that I saw in the stories that I loved. Here's the thing, superficial friendship is super easy. You know, it's often like a matter of convenience. It's the people you see every day. It's your coworkers. But like a deeper bond, like caring for people who share your values, like that's rare. And I think it's becoming even more rare in modern society. We live in this strange world where the technology we have was supposed to connect us. Like, Facebook's original motto was all about making the world more connected. And yet I would argue that we are more socially disconnected than ever. So this ideal, this idea of fellowship, of a deep friendship, it can seem, practically speaking, kind of ethereal, kind of something that's hard to grasp onto, something it's just something you read about in books. But I want to peel back the onion a little bit and talk about this concept, this idea of friendship, of fellowship through the lens of Western philosophy. And I think the best place I can think of to start, let me grab it. It's from this movie, It's a Wonderful Life. It's a movie I grew up watching every Christmas. And in it, the angel Clarence tells George Bailey something very important. The ultimate lesson of the movie, and that is, remember, no man is a failure who has friends.
Sir?
That's a Christmas present from a very dear friend of mine.
It is this beautiful story about a man who didn't realize the impact of his own friendship within his community. And this is a biblical concept. The book of Proverbs literally says, "One who has unreliable friends soon comes to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother." Jesus himself said, "Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends." This is the ideal that is found in the HBO series Band of Brothers. If you've seen it, you know it's about the bonds of brotherhood that are formed through war. And really that's the strongest common bond that you can think of. You see it play out in the show. If I'm being honest, it's one of the reasons I joined the Air Force. I wanted to find that kind of brotherhood. I wanted that connection to something that was bigger than myself. But, and here's the thing about ideals, they're very difficult to live up to, particularly in real life. For me, if I'm being honest, the reality of military culture today doesn't come close to the war movies that I grew up watching. And that might seem kind of naive. Of course it doesn't. But to me, it's been something very real and difficult that I've had to grapple with throughout my whole career. That's the reality check. That's the disappointment I think we have to face when we look at the cultural decline of friendship. But before we can really mourn what's been lost, I've talked about it a few times, but we do have to be able to understand the ideal, that thing that's worth striving for. When we talk about friendship on a philosophical level, what does that actually mean? I would argue this guy got it. Tolkien understood the ideal. Fellowship is literally in the title of the first Lord of the Rings book. And one of the most tragic moments in the film and the book is the final chapter, the breaking of the fellowship. So for this, I want to jump back into Dr. Snyder's thoughts, and he describes it really well. He basically points out that Tolkien's view of friendship was shaped by his own experience at school in Birmingham, and later as a student and professor at Oxford University. He saw fellowship as something beyond individual surface-level friendship. It's this thing rooted in the ideal, in virtue. It's where there's a higher calling that brings people together. This is where the Western philosophy piece comes in, because Tolkien would have studied this. In Plato's time, philia is the Greek word for friendship, whereas koinonia, which I'm definitely pronouncing these Greek words wrong. I'm sorry, Dr. Snyder, but he's the one who pointed them out, and I think it really does enlighten our own understanding of Tolkien's view of this philosophy. So yeah, koinonia is the word for fellowship. Plato and then later Aristotle would define these philosophical terms as something that was a virtuous ideal, a thing worth striving for. Girl worth fighting for. Worth fighting for. So it kind of makes perfect sense that these philosophical foundations inform the new and burgeoning philosophy several hundred years later, which is Stoicism. The best example of the philosophy of friendship, the value and virtue of friendship from a Stoic perspective comes from Seneca. So Seneca wrote 124 letters to his friend Lucilius. These letters kind of serve as for lack of a better term, a philosophical handbook or a guidebook for living a virtuous life. So in letter number 9, Seneca says this: "Let us now return to the question. The wise man, I say, self-sufficient though he may be." And again, a little editorial. You could be the smartest, most self-sufficient, successful guy, philosopher in the universe. "Nevertheless, desires friends, if only for the purpose of practicing friendship, in order that his noble qualities may not lie dormant." I'm going to paraphrase, but Seneca goes on to basically describe the difference between relationships of convenience and the ideal of friendship for friendship's sake, friendship for practicing the virtue. If nothing else, it is a distinctly human opportunity to practice the other virtues and build up your fellow man with the virtues that you care about, with the things that you value, your values. And that's the thing, if I may, on a brief aside, that's one of the few things that we as humans can do. We have this remarkable ability that the rest in the animal kingdom does not have. So regardless of your religious or spiritual or philosophical view, I think that humanity's ability to reason and humanity's ability to relate just for the sake of the relationship. We have the ability to form bonds of fellowship with our fellow men that are not centered on any kind of transaction. It's kind of perplexing and unusual when you compare it to the social structures of other species on this planet. It is this strangely unique thing. A human is like the only creature that will change his environment or change his relationships for reasons of pure personal preference. Birds and fish migrate every year following the same patterns. Chimpanzees have biologically driven communal norms, but like we humans have this strange ability to reason, to think about our thoughts, and also this strange ability to form relationships with one another in a way that no one else in the entire animal kingdom can do. And this is a precursor, because like if you think about the timeline from Platonic philosophy to Stoicism, like this precedes modern theological Judeo-Christian philosophy. But there's an interesting link. Like there's the 12 disciples, who was this fellowship built on a central shared mission that certainly wasn't about biology or convenience, coming from all different walks of life to follow this crazy Jesus guy. But those are just examples that you could find in the New Testament. Snyder goes on to point out the Catholic philosopher Thomas Aquinas. He viewed friendship as not this inevitable thing. It is distinct, it is beautiful, it is unusual, and therefore it is a virtue to be cultivated. So this theological perspective of Western philosophy and Stoicism and Platonic ideas, and Platonic I mean by the Plato you get the idea. This serves as I think the example for Tolkien, which is his experience with the Inklings. So Tolkien literally formed this fellowship of academics, of authors, of fellow thinkers. It was him, C.S. Lewis, and a few others that they would gather every week at the Eagle and Child pub, or as they called it, the Bird and the Baby. Interestingly enough, Stephen literally just visited there for the first time on a recent trip. But it wasn't like a overly complicated philosophical rhetoric formal gathering. It was literally a couple of dudes who gathered in a pub, who would drink beer by the fire. For long country walks, they'd debate literature, politics, current events, philosophy, theology. Like, they didn't agree on a lot of this stuff, but they were literally walking the walk and talking the talk. Before, he said, dramatically grabbing a prop to emphasize his point, before they were literally writing the books that would embody these principles that they lived out. The Hobbit starts off with a deeply comfortable and fairly isolated Bilbo Baggins, who is very reluctant to join any sort of new adventure and form any kind of new friendships with these strange dwarven folk from a faraway land that he felt he had nothing in common with. But he came to believe in this shared cause, reclaiming Thorin Oakenshield's homeland and defeating the dragon, Smaug. At the end of The Hobbit, there's this moment where he's faced with this moral quandary of what's the right thing to do with the Arkenstone, and that's the moment that he must, despite his friendship with Thorin, in a way betray his friendship with Thorin and the company to do the higher right thing, but it nearly breaks him. It's heartbreaking.
The stone is real. I gave it to them.
But in the end, I think Tolkien really beautifully shows a healed relationship that, like, it wasn't just that the dragon was defeated, but maybe more importantly, Thorin's dying words. He calls up Bilbo in sorrow and regret and asks to restore that friendship.
I wish to part from you in friendship. No.
And like I mentioned a few minutes ago, like the theme carries through the Fellowship of the Ring. Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin, they already have their small little fellowship of hobbits in the Shire before they join the larger one. Like, they share meals, songs, drinking together, taking long country walks. I mean, it really does mimic what the Inklings themselves practiced. The final chapter is heartbreaking. The fellowship breaks. Gandalf falls in Moria. Boromir betrays the company and tries to take the ring from Frodo. And here's the interesting thing. Even after Boromir's death, Aragorn help Merry and Frodo. No. Aragorn actually chooses to rescue Merry and Pippin rather than pursue Frodo and Sam, which, like, the destruction of the ring is the whole point of the quest in the first place. But for Aragorn, the virtue of friendship, the right choice in the moment, is to save the friends that he knows are in mortal danger.
We will not abandon Merry and Pippin to torment and death.
He knows Merry and Pippin are kidnapped by the orc, and that is something that he and Legolas and Gimli cannot live with. You know, interestingly, this is kind of like virtue ethics in action. Like, you have the consequentialist view, which would have been like whatever the maximum good for the most people, which if you had made that decision, Aragorn would have maybe taken the remaining company to try to go chase down Frodo and and protect him so that they would have the biggest chance of getting to Mount Doom. Instead, it's more of a virtue ethics perspective where Aragorn is doing the right thing for the right thing's sake. And that tension plays out a lot in Lord of the Rings. I think Tolkien really plays with that notion very well because in a strange sense, a lot of moments of fate, of maybe intervention of some form of higher power, a will that is against the ring, not just the evil will of the ring. You could make the argument that that's what plays into the fact that, leads Aragorn and the company to rescue Merry and Pippin, to encounter Theoden and the Rohirrim and take them to fight the battle at Minas Tirith. And in the end, that did actually directly contribute that one precious chance he needed to destroy the ring on Mount Doom. But I digress. I kind of nerded out there for a minute. Sorry, not sorry. Let's end on a downer, shall we? Not really, maybe kind of. Let's talk about the reality check. In real life, most of us don't have a Sam. Deep friendships are tough to build. Even when they form, they're difficult to hold on to. Life sweeps us along. I'll speak from my experience. And in my Air Force career, I move every few years. I go from assignment to assignment. I've been in South Carolina and Korea and Alabama, Georgia, basically the other side of the world or the Southeast. But point is, it's difficult to maintain any kind of friendship, surface level or otherwise, just based on not being in the same community. And even if that weren't the case, the things that I hoped and dreamed for, like I talked about earlier in the video, my looking for the real life major winters, they're by far the exception. They're not the rule. In fact, some of the best leaders I've met in the military and some of the worst leaders and worst people that I've ever met have been in the military. It's this strange disconnect and disappointment. It's when, I don't know if you've experienced this, but the best way I can describe it is that truly believing, I'm a true blue all-American. I love philosophy, I love theology, but I also actually really believe this shit. And so there have been these times where I've clawed at the ideal that I so desperately desire, the wanting that brotherhood, that's any kind of support system, connection of shared mission. And there have been times where it seemed no matter what I did, it was never good enough. There was no one there. And that sucks. It really sucks. And that's the reality that I'm willing to bet, and it makes me a little depressed to think of, but I'm willing to bet that I'm not the only one. I think the honest truth is our culture is fractured. And there may not be a lot of true believers left. And I don't mean in the traditional Christian theological sense. I mean true believers in the virtues that are found in the very foundation of Western philosophy. I'm rewatching Game of Thrones right now, and it's almost strangely connecting more in season 1 because Sean Bean's character, speaking of Fellowship of the Ring, Boromir, aka Ned Stark, Ned Stark is the rare man, the man of honor. It makes him the fish out of water. He is the exception. I don't think we even know what we believe anymore. Politics continues to divide us. Identitarian division seems to only grow. I feel like communities are more and more torn apart. We've forgotten about the big important things that we should all believe in that can bring us together and help us overcome the stupid stuff that we fight over all the time that you see in your Facebook feed, or that your mom sees in her Facebook feed. But you get the idea. I think fellowship, that one virtue, it's a thing that's worth being reclaimed. And if I'm honest, I don't know how we even begin to change that in modern society. But I do think we can change that for ourselves. It's not easy. It's something that you have to seek. And I'm kind of preaching this to myself because there have been far too many times in my life where it's hard, and it's just easier to give up. But I think friendship, fellowship, that is a good. It is a virtue. It is, as Sam would say, it is a good that is worth fighting for. Peace.
Resentment is anger that has been quieted but not resolved. The slowest acting poison in human relationships is that of resentment. The grudge, the unforgiven slight, the suspicion of motive, or the worst thing, particularly for marriages, keeping score on the people that you love. My favorite kind of story has always been one where brothers or best friends are turned into enemies. It's heartbreaking to me how disordered and twisted two hearts can become, especially when they once were filled with love and appreciation. The fallout of Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi has never stopped speaking to me. I remember being 15 and sitting next to my brother and best friend watching Revenge of the Sith in theaters.
You were my brother, Anakin! I loved you!
The motif is classic, biblical in origin, so I want to talk to you about how friendships die. Because unlike Padme's democracy, it's not with thundering applause, it's often eerily quiet. Understated. Since we've been focusing on friendship and how to make friends, it makes sense we also look at how you lose them, because it happens a bit at a time and then all at once. Think of all the times two characters were with one another for the last time as friends or as lovers. Anakin and Obi-Wan on the platform on Coruscant, smiling softly, grateful to one another. But something is wrong. Before we go deeper on Star Wars, let's rewind to the dawn of human storytelling, to the children of Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel. The name of Cain means to harvest, grow, or cultivate. Abel means vapor or breath. Out of bitterness and anger, Cain takes Abel's life when his brother's offering to God is viewed more favorably. Cain is confused. It's been repeated again and again, both on the storybook page and in reality, our daily lives. We betray our design, we lash out against those who we love, and we feel a dark pull toward unearned glory and recognition, which alienates the affection of people around us. I just finished reading The Inklings by Humphrey Carpenter, the definitive biography of the literary friend group and men's club assembled around C.S. Lewis at Oxford in the 1930s and 40s. Lewis's friendship with J.R.R. Tolkien is borderline mythological today. It excites fantasy nerds to know that the author of the Chronicles of Narnia and the man behind Lord of the Rings and Middle-earth were once together, sharing ideas by the fireside, reading to one another, and talking about faith and philosophy. Now, to be clear, Lewis never shared Narnia in meetings of the Inklings, and Tolkien didn't care to hear about it after his initial dislike of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. But the point I'm getting at here is that their famous friendship, which gets talked about so much, was already on life support in 1950 when Narnia came about. This friendship was deep, and it ends rather sadly. I want to talk about how it turned cold against the backdrop of Star Wars, and hopefully you take away a lesson or two, because I have lost friends. It feels like a death. It really does. A person so close exiting your life, sometimes even without a fight, they just cut ties and are gone. I've mourned it, wondering what I could have done differently. And I know that I'm not alone in that. Death by a Thousand Cuts is a good way to describe how Tolkien and Lewis became estranged from one another. The biography is a good reminder that our words stick with people, especially the ones that we might wish to take back. Exercise discretion when conversing. Avoid boastfulness. Let your words demonstrate thoughtfulness, says Epictetus.
Great care we must take.
I don't think I could ever disagree with a guy named Epictetus.
Lewis did not always take care. He was the more affectionate of the two men, but also a loose cannon with his judgments and observations about the world. Going back to his childhood, this was a huge problem for Lewis, which his private tutor, Mr. Kirkpatrick, called out in him on numerous occasions because Lewis would cast judgments and disparage places that he had never been.
It's all Obi-Wan's fault. He's jealous. He's holding me back.
And so here's what went wrong with Lewis and Tolkien. Famously, Tolkien had played a vital role in bringing C.S. to believe in God and the divinity of Jesus Christ. But when Lewis converted, he landed in the Anglican Church and defaulted to his Northern Irish resentments toward Catholics, which were not good or kind. And Tolkien was very Catholic. You know, it's a strange thing, really, to be an atheist for so many years, to convert, to write a book called Mere pioneer Christianity, which aims to transcend denominational bickering and still be crude toward your closest friend about Catholics, a man who ministered to you. In the company of his brother, Lewis was known to call Catholics bogrots and bogtrotters, and it was known how hard he tried to keep that tamped down when he was with his friend Tolkien. But the problem is that once your friendship or even a romantic relationship has been invaded by a topic that cannot be broached, you've contracted a fatal illness that is eventually going to consume the entire relationship. It will die.
What is it?
Nothing.
Don't do this. Don't shut me out. Let me help you.
Then one day, on a walk at Oxford, Tolkien shared with Lewis that he had a special devotion to St. John, and Lewis bristled very visibly before saying that Tolkien and St. John had nothing in common. It's like your friends saying they deeply admire Mr. Rogers and want to be more like him, and then you respond by saying, "Good luck with that," instead of engaging sincerely, asking them questions about it, being interested. Tolkien felt now with Lewis that he was being looked down on as a shabby little Catholic. He felt judged, and he probably was. It's the deep irony of this friendship because it began without a shared love of Christianity, and once that love was shared, it played a part in driving them apart. Some of you might know a lot about Tolkien and Lewis and say, no, they were always friends and to the end, and that's true in word, but contempt, resentment, and sarcasm were in the vein of their friendship, particularly by the 1950s, and it would never kill the thing entirely, but it placed it in a coma. It could no longer grow or produce fruit. It stayed frozen and it completely withered. I'm a Star Wars fanatic, so Obi-Wan and Anakin are hard not to think about here. They served alongside one another in the Clone Wars, and they knew each other intimately as Master and Padawan, but they could not discuss what was really going on inside Anakin for most of his life. Anakin always felt he was being lectured by Obi-Wan, and that's mostly true. Even Obi-Wan's master, Qui-Gon, found young Kenobi to be an exhausting Puritan at times, unable to adjust his doctrinaire approach to doing anything. Anakin couldn't talk to Obi-Wan about loving Padme. He didn't speak with him about just how angry he was over what happened with the killing of his mother on Tatooine.
I killed them, and not just the men.
Gets talked a lot about by Star Wars fans. Would things have been different if Qui-Gon was his master instead of Obi-Wan? And maybe, possibly. I think Anakin needed something that Obi-Wan couldn't give him. They didn't ever go beyond the surface level of backslapping, recurring jokes, and trusting one another in battle. That should sound familiar to a lot of you. There are your drinking buddies and high school friends who you like to reminisce with, but you have nothing new going on. And any discussion of deeper feelings or your thoughts, it hits an immediate wall because that's not what your friendship is about. So there were missing pieces. And then, of course, there was a third wheel in Chancellor Palpatine who wedged himself into that gap as someone who could go deeper with Anakin than Obi-Wan was willing to. The corruption and alienation happened so fast, and it was beyond the point of saving when Obi-Wan made the ask of Anakin to spy on Palpatine for the Jedi Council. It's so sad because no one knew what they were doing in this moment, and you just want to reach out through the screen and scream, "Stop!" Obi-Wan didn't choose to drive Anakin away. He just had no idea how far along the dark path his friend was at this time, because they couldn't talk. The only thing that can be said was working was gratitude. Cicero wrote troves about how friendship and gratitude go hand in hand. The simple act of saying thank you is practically divine to Cicero, and that is one of the last things that Anakin and Obi-Wan discuss, which is Anakin being grateful, even though he doesn't show it enough. Tolkien and Lewis's third wheel, or wedge, was a fellow Inkling named Charles Williams, whom Tolkien did his best to enjoy but did not like. Lewis was apparently bowled over and very impressionable, as Tolkien later put it, and his smittenness with Williams was a problem for Tolkien on many levels. To be clear, Tolkien was a bit of a withholding and judgmental guy. His crabbiness is exhausting to read about at times. Just look at all the why did Tolkien hate this, that, and the other videos. Most of them are in fact true. He hated a lot of stuff rather unreasonably. Lewis had the opposite problem. He gave affection too freely, sometimes in ways that cheapened his love and encouragement to friends like Tolkien. He didn't have enough boundaries, even though he talked a big game about having them. There are so many more tiny slights and offenses between them before CS finally dies in 1963. They would share space, they would have drinks together, they would support each other professionally when possible, but the well of resentment had run black. Their conversations were short and professional in the final years. In the end, much like Anakin and Obi-Wan, Lewis would eventually get married in secret and conceal it from Tolkien for quite some time. In classic Tolkien fashion, he cared more than a little that Lewis married a divorcee, which was very taboo, and in classic Lewis fashion, he did whatever he could to justify the marriage to himself. And there was a lot of hurt feelings about it in both directions. Tolkien felt pushed away from his old friend, and he was also envious and resentful of Lewis's popularity around the world as a Christian apologist. It was either jealousy or what he called it, the vulgarity of Lewis's success, which suggests that he might have thought that Lewis was overrated and not as good as people thought. But still, part of Lewis's character was to ceaselessly love on Tolkien, whereas Tolkien withdrew his affections and time from his old friend Lewis. And when Tolkien heard that Lewis had died, he wrote to his daughter, "So far, I have felt the normal feelings of a man my age. Like an old tree that is losing all its leaves one by one, this one feels like an axe blow near the roots." The image of a tree being mortally wounded is enough to shutter your eyes for a moment. How many friends have we lost or lost track of, only to hear what's become of them long after the warmest feelings have faded? These men loved one another deeply, but there was so much hurt left unaddressed and undiscussed, and it all began with some unthoughtful sarcasm that Lewis let loose on a walk together, and Tolkien's feeling that he couldn't so much as share one of his favorite poems with Lewis called The Pearl, because he knew that Lewis would have nothing nice to say about it. Has your mom ever said, if you have nothing nice to say, don't say it at all? Well, it's actually important. We long to share things with people. It hurts how much we want to hold out our favorite toy to someone and have them love it the way that we do. That broken urge for validation, for being seen, the need to have our heart understood, you could say that that is what Cain felt when he violently lashed out at Abel. God knew Cain's offering to him was not his best, but you can't help but wonder how sincerely Cain felt that it was. And so blood was spilled. Exile became canon. Estrangement and the longing to be understood by someone, anyone, took their place in the human heart the way that we know it today. Choose your words thoughtfully. Invest in friendships where openness is an expectation. Know that you're not the only one grasping for something beyond words. Help your friends in their search, and you might find what you're looking for along the way. Be a real friend to someone. Do all you can to keep resentment, that quiet anger at bay, because nothing good comes from it. To close this book on Anakin and Obi-Wan, as well as Lewis and Tolkien, I mentioned Anakin and Obi-Wan's final interaction as friends being one of gratitude. 2 years after Lewis's death, Tolkien wrote a note of gratitude about his old friend. And he said of C.S. Lewis, "The unpayable debt that I owe to him was not to influence as it is ordinarily understood, but sheer encouragement. He was for long my only audience. Only from him did I ever get the idea that my stuff could be more than a private hobby. But for his interest, an unceasing eagerness for more, I should never have brought The Lord of the Rings to a conclusion. If you do nothing else today, tell a friend thank you for everything." I'm Steven, and you've been watching Geeky Stoics.
Why is making friends so hard? This video is about how Harry Potter shows you that shared values are what builds true friendship. And more importantly, why you need to stop trying to fit in and become a man that attracts real friendship. C.S. Lewis said it best: real friendship happens when you're chasing something bigger than just hanging out. Let me explain. Have you ever moved to a new town or started a new job and found yourself feeling just isolated and lonely? Put more simply, have you ever suffered a shortage of friends? Think about it. The best friends in our lives are so often the kid next to us in class who was the victim of the same bully. Like, you'll have these moments where you laugh together and you realize there's someone else in the room who sees things the way you see them. Lewis says that friendship is born when another person says, "You too?" A great example of this idea in action can be seen in the Harry Potter series. The friendship between Harry, Ron, and Hermione, it's a central theme throughout the book. At the beginning of the series, the three characters are drawn together by chance on the train to Hogwarts, but the bond deepens when Harry and Ron help save Hermione from the troll loose in the school at the end of the movie. But I want you to really reflect on this moment. Early on in The Philosopher's Stone, Harry very quickly chooses Ron as a friend over the likes of Draco Malfoy. Now, Harry can sense Draco's arrogance and cruelty from his time being raised by a wicked aunt and uncle, the Dursleys. He may not realize it, but Harry makes a significant decision when he chooses Ron as his friend. Because when Harry and Ron meet on the Hogwarts Express, they immediately bond over this shared sense of excitement about attending the Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry.
I'm Ron, by the way. Ron Weasley. I'm Harry Potter.
Meanwhile, Draco is introduced as this spoiled, entitled pureblood who looks down on Ron and dismisses him as the wrong sort due to his family's lack of wealth. Now, this scene not only shows Draco's snobbish attitude, but it also highlights Harry's ability to look beyond the superficial. By choosing Ron as his friend, Harry is rejecting, in a sense, the wizarding world's social hierarchies. And character matters more than being on the in crowd, whatever that means.
I can help you there. I think I can tell the wrong sort for myself, thanks.
And the scene also foreshadows the rivalry between Harry and Draco, as well as the overall tensions between the Gryffindor and Slytherin house, which play out throughout the course of the series. Now, back to C.S. Lewis. He's, of course, the author of the beloved Narnia books, but he has this book called The Four Loves. It's really good, and it's dedicated to explaining how important friendship is and how you can grow your inner circle. He said, quote, "That is why those pathetic people who simply want friends can never make any." See, the very condition of wanting friends, that we should want something else besides friend. So what Lewis is saying here is that we should focus on our mission and our values first. In pursuing something meaningful, friends will naturally present themselves as fellow travelers who see the same truth that you do. Think of it, the houses of Hogwarts are interesting because obviously the school wants to foster some form of camaraderie amongst the wizards, but by sorting students into houses based on their personality type and their values, it kind of leaves the houses bound to have some kind of conflict and some kind of cliques. But true friendship has to be discriminatory. To say, "These are my friends," implies those are not. Now, of course, you've probably heard it said a million times, parents and mentors, that you are who you hang out with. And for better or worse, most of us do learn that as adults. Friendship kind of does help withdraw people from more, I'd say, collective togetherness, and often into those smaller groups of 2 to 3. And this makes friendship, in a way, a threat to more collectivist, authoritarian ideologies, and those who would prefer that all are companions, as C.S. Lewis says, but none are friends. And this is where J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter communicates this idea perfectly. And it's in the virtuous rebellion of Harry, Ron, and Hermione throughout the whole series. Because Dumbledore saw the value in this spirit because he knew the dark authoritarian times that were coming, and that the herd mentality is exactly what they need a little bit less of in order to defeat Voldemort and his movement. Because think about it, we're going to jump forward a little bit to Order of the Phoenix, which, by the way, I think Phoenix has to be my second favorite Harry Potter book, behind Prisoner of Azkaban. But this is the strange thing about me, is that I jumped on the Harry Potter train very late in life. Like, I saw the films growing up once or twice, not even really when they came out in theaters, but it was like 2 years ago was the first time I ever actually went through and read the Harry Potter books as like a 32-year-old guy. And it was a very different experience as someone who didn't grow up reading them. And it really, like, I'm weirdly glad that I did, because it gave me that much more of an appreciation for J.K. Rowling's writing, and particularly how the theme of friendship really informs the story and really becomes the cornerstone of the forces of good that defeat the forces of evil. Very refreshing story, and I think is only more so now in an age where we're more and more isolated and more polarized politically and socially. This theme of friendship, of bonds over common value, over common purpose, is so freaking important. But I digress. Back to the main point. I want to get back to Order of the Phoenix, because as we recall, life at Hogwarts, it takes this dark turn with the arrival of Professor Umbridge, who imposes these strict rules and harsh punishments on the students. You guys remember, I'm sure, that's the blood quill punishment and the Muggle-born registration and the banning the defense against the dark arts, and worst of all, the greatest crime, humiliating Professor Trelawney. How dare you, Professor Umbridge? What a I'm just saying. Hot takes, I know. Don't like Professor Umbridge. Really bold statement there. But yes, of course, no surprise, she is secretly connected to the Death Eaters, which is the group of wizards and witches that are sworn to serve Voldemort and carry out his dastardly evil plans. Shocker. Instead of breaking apart, Harry and his friends pull closer together to save Hogwarts and protect the most vulnerable in the school. And that's part of what underpins Ron, Harry, and Hermione's evolving friendship throughout the book. Because as the kids form Dumbledore's army, as they call it, Harry is able to pass on his knowledge of self-defense against the dark arts to all the other students who are, by the way, also willing to stand up to Professor Umbridge. Again, it's that common purpose, that common theme. Because we can only protect and advance our own values if we actually stand up for them. These bonds are a natural consequence of choosing a life of purpose. Because as the great poet Lin-Manuel Miranda so eloquently put it, if you stand for nothing, Burr, what'll you fall for? I had to get the Hamilton reference in. Man, this video is all over the C.S. Lewis, Hamilton, J.K. Rowling, but this is what we do at Geeky Stoic. But and there is also a cautionary tale to this, because rest assured, not so good people will also find their own kindred spirits. As they say, birds of a feather do flock together, including the bad ones. For villains, this is why their quote-unquote friendships are so frail, and they present more like alliances. C.S. Lewis begins his analysis of friendship by pointing out its lack of necessity in the first place. Like, we don't need friendship to survive. We don't need it to reproduce. It's not a biological instinct. Bad guys are always Darwinian in nature. They're always cutthroat. They view people as tools to throw them away when they're no longer useful. Like, a friend is an ally, but an ally is not always a friend. Think of Voldemort. He kills Severus Snape because he believes that it will make him the true master of the Elder Wand. In the Goblet of Fire, Voldemort mutilates his own father, that's his own follower, Peter Pettigrew, Wormtail, by giving him the gift of the Silver Hand. Oof. He also just freely uses the resources of his followers, the Death Eaters, like the Malfoys. He cares nothing for any of their safety. So friendship is, of course, something different. It's not strategic, it's generous. It's not proud, it's humble, it's kind. Friendship, as one of those C.S. Lewis's four loves, is both sacrificial and it expresses a form of gratitude. A friend sees that they, their friends, are splendid and counts himself as lucky to be among them. So, if you're a friend, go be a friend. And if you're in search of friends, well, like and subscribe to this. No, I'm kidding. No. If you're in search of friends, show the world what you're about. Stand for what you believe in, and someone in God's good time will notice. Until next time, may the Force be with you.
I've been thinking about something Dumbledore said to me.
What's that?
That even though we've got a fight ahead of us, we've got one thing that Voldemort doesn't have.
Yeah?
Something worth fighting for.